Hello everyone, welcome back to another tier list video. The last one did surprisingly well, so I figured to do another one with the Gen 2 cast, the Revenge of the Island cast. This might be a bit weird to say, but this is probably my favorite cast out of the 4 generations. And the reason for that is because this was the first cast I saw as I was a fan. Like, I started being a fan of Total Drama in, I think, 2011, 2012. And that's when the Revenge of the Island characters were at their peak. I guess that's when it was all getting started, so naturally, that's when I discovered my appreciation for them. I know that that might be an unpopular opinion. I think Gen 1, the island characters, and then the reboot characters are probably, most people's favorite gens, but no, I love these guys. Anyway, we're going to be doing the tier list based on how hard they are to write for again. I just want to make it clear that I put it here, hardest to write for, but not impossible. I don't think any character is impossible to write for. I think that things can be hard, but if you're a good enough writer, then you can do it pretty well. It's just a matter of how the characters are relative to one another, okay? I also want to make it clear that I am judging this based on if these characters were finalists in your fanfictions, in your rewrites, how hard it is to portray them well, okay? So, like, you can't write any character ever, but if it's not written well, then, that doesn't count. So, we're going to start things off with Anne Maria. Now, here's the interesting thing about Anne Maria. She is a character that is very fun, I feel. She has that conflict with Zoe and Mike, aka Vito. The problem is, I feel like it kind of ends a little abruptly. She kind of quits the game halfway through. And because of that, there is a lot of stuff you can do there. Obviously she is kind of, if Harold was, Napoleon Dynamite parody, as a callback to the early 2000s, then Anne Maria is kind of like a callback to the early 2010s with the Jersey Shore stuff, right? I feel like that'd be harder to make funny nowadays, because, like, no one really thinks of the Jersey Shore anymore. But, you can do stuff beyond that. Harold, I feel like the gimmick is, like, he's so, Napoleon Dynamite coded, but he's still a nerd at the end of the day. Even though Anne Maria is someone who is a walking reference to the Jersey Shore, you can still do stuff, like, Jersey fashionista, that's still an archetype you can work with. And, for that, I think Anne Maria, oof. I don't know, she is, like, a character who can create conflict, but I don't think she's a villain, I don't think she's evil, I think she's sassy, and that can be fun. Survivor, of course, the show that Total Drama is based on, some of the sassier, funnier characters tend to be your finalists or winners even, so I would say A. I would say it's pretty easy to write for her. She can be a fun force to be reckoned with, she can be a fun, misunderstood sort of character, or she can be, like, kind of an antagonist. All these avenues are very valid, very fun to do, so yeah. Brick is another interesting character. Eliminated the same episode as Anne Maria, actually. I feel like even though Brick is a pre-merge character and he only lasted 17 episodes, he has a very full story. One that has a lot of potential for the future, and one that shows a lot of promise. There's a reason why this guy is so heavily requested to be an All-Stars, right, over Sam, right? Brick's really fun. He's like this military man, but he's not as hard as you think he is. He's very, easygoing. He's very friendly. He has trouble with, I wouldn't say, like, masculinity, but there are times where Joe and sometimes Lightning will judge him, and sometimes even Scott, I think, as well. So I like Brick. Brick is just a very fun character, and I don't know how easy it would be to write for, though. I feel like you could do a lot if you're doing a post-canon fanfic, and obviously I'm very biased to, the post-canon fanfics, post-canon competition fics, because that's the fanfic that I'm writing, it's in the description below. But, like, in an alternate universe fanfic, you have a lot of avenues to go for, because you could have him, maybe he's hiding his strength, maybe he's hiding his fears and other people are judging him, maybe he wants to prove himself to Joe or Lightning, I don't know, Brick is just a fun character to use. I've read a lot of fanfics where Brick is just a fun person to be around. You might notice that a lot of the Total Drama guys are very rarely, like, kind of positive. Sometimes they're villains, sometimes they're, I'm not gonna say problematic, but, they're goofballs. Like Tyler or Ezekiel or Coach, not goofballs, but you know what I mean, like, they're more comedy-centric, they're more sassy, like Noah. Majority of the guys in the Total Drama reboot actually are either, dumb comic relief, they're supposed to be, like, kind of stupid, or they're more antagonistic villains, right? Well, I wouldn't say villains, but, more antagonistic forces. Brick is the very rare example in the show of a positive person, so I can't in good faith say he's the easiest to write for. I can't put him in the highest tier. I feel like there's something pushing him back. The thing that's pushing him back in my head is just, you know what? No, I feel like Brick is, like, underrated in terms of, like, someone to write for. Yeah, let's put him there. B is just hard to write for. I think that B, because this is obviously a written medium, fanfics, and a lot of his personification is more visual, not gags, but visual, you know, doings. It's hard to write for that. It's not impossible, again, but B is a character that he benefits from the animation, from his creativity, and from having Dawn in the cast, because Dawn is someone who can, like, speak for him. Maybe B could, like, build a little robot Stephen Hawking kind of thing so he can talk. And, like, that would be fine, but I feel like having a character who's intentionally quiet is hard to make your finalist character, and, like, obviously you can just make him talk, but then that's not really B anymore, right? Then that's not really the character. I don't really think you should do an arc of him learning to talk. I don't think he's mute. Oh, obviously he screams, so he's not mute, but I don't know, maybe he's shy. I don't know if that would be, like, a good idea to have, like, an arc where he learns to talk, because, like, I feel like he's a representation of people who are mute, even though he's not technically mute. I don't know, man. I would say B is probably the hardest to write for, just because his whole thing is that he doesn't talk, right? He's silent. Cameron is interesting because I feel like Cameron is one of the few times where Total Drama has a definitive, like, one season arc where obviously he's the bubble boy. He's shy. He's not shy. Sorry. He's just very not introverted, but, like, I want to say lives in a bubble, but that's literal. It's like he's very, like, sheltered, I guess. And obviously the turnaround is that he eventually wins the season in most countries. That's supposed to be like oh my god, he's like the ultimate underdog. He beat, like, lightning, right? And that's great. I think that if you're doing a alternate universe fanfic, that's already such a strong showing. Of course, he already won, so it wouldn't be that unique. But there's a lot to go for that. If you go with All Stars, you could go with his friendship with Gwen and Mike and Zoe. Of course, you could do that. I'm trying to think. I don't know. I feel like Cameron's pretty easy to write for. He's not a hard character to really represent. He's kind of like he's a nerd, but he's not a geek, and he's like a helpful, smart, like, nerd who knows his way around technology. He's another positive character, actually, now that I think about it. I don't know, do people like Cameron? Because, like, I remember back in the day, he'd get, like, hated a lot. I feel like things have turned around. Obviously, All Stars does not help. There's a lot of negativity around All Stars. Cameron's not really, like, the worst part, I don't think, anymore. He was at the time. A lot of the 2013 fan base really did not like Cameron. But, I don't know, I feel like I'll put him in, like, A. I think A tier suits him. I'll put him in B just because he is, like, the winner character, right? And I think that alone makes him a little harder to justify why he's, winning again. But we'll see. Either in a post-canon fanfic, he would be a two-time winner, or be a two-time finalist at least. Or in an alternate universe where it's like, oh, you made a fanfic where Cameron wins. That's interesting, because he already won, right? Next we have Dakota, who's interesting because you have the different versions of her. You have the one where she's just a normal person, and then you have the Dakotazoid. And I feel like a lot of stories that I've read that are post-canon, they always have the funny justification of like, oh, I bought surgery. I'm not, a monster. I'm not like, this Dakotazoid anymore. And it's kind of like hand-waved away because obviously that's, a little cliche at this point. But I think it's valid because while the Dakotazoid is like a fun way to end her story of her literally being the biggest thing ever, it's also, that's an interesting thing to do with Dakota, is that she is like this rich girl and she wants to, like, I guess she wants to prove herself, and she wants to show that she's more than just her money, she's more than vain, and, the fact that she's in a relationship with Sam, right, that's cute. It's like, you have the attractive not fashionista, but like the attractive popular girl, and then you have like the nerd, and they're a couple. It's like, that's interesting. It's an interesting, like, odd couple, but it's very wholesome and fun. And then on top of that, I feel like there are hints that Dakota doesn't really have a lot of friends. So right off the bat, there's like good promise for the character, similar to Ezekiel. There's a lot of good promise that kind of, it makes it a little difficult when they both turn into monsters, basically. But I feel like Dakota is a character that I never really see her be an important person in stories. I feel like she's almost always an early boot or a surprise returnee, and then again an early boot. But man, I feel like I'd give her like B tier, because like while her archetype is something that can be very fun, because again, usually with the popular girl characters, they're kind of the antagonists, right? You have Heather and Julia and all that stuff, but Dakota really isn't like that. She's actually very nice, and maybe that could be a story you could go with. Like, people kind of judge her because they think they know her, but they really don't. The reason why she's in B and not A is because, again, the Dakotazoid thing is a little tough to write around, but yeah, I mean, I feel like Dakota is a character that would be very interesting to see back. I feel like even if Total Drama continued past the Ronkius race, a pre-reboot post-Ronkius race, they probably wouldn't have done anything with Dakota because, they did the Dakotazoid thing for a reason. They're not going to undo that. Yeah, I feel like B is where she should go. Dawn is a harder character to write for. I'm actually going to give Dawn D for Dawn, because I feel like a lot of people tend to overdo her aura powers, and they make it so that she's overpowered, she can like sense everything, and they make her an overly nice girl, and I don't really like that. I think having a character like that is kind of boring, kind of to, I don't like this term, but Mary Sue. Um, and, you know, Dawn isn't really like that. She doesn't really care that much about other humans, if you notice in the show. She's kind of exposing people's secrets. She's kind of socially unaware. She gets mad as well at Scott. So, I don't know. I would put her in D tier because as fun as it is to have this kind of supernatural sort of character, it is just a harder person to write for because she has powers. You have to like balance it so that she's not overpowered. And you know, I feel like in the grand scheme of things, Dawn is just a character that it's hard to imagine her going far because she does go so early. Like, I don't know if that's just me, because obviously some of these other characters also go early, but Dawn is like a character that's like, man, what does it even look like her making the purge? What does that even look like? I don't know. I feel like a lot of people have ideas to do with Dawn, but you just have to manage it so that it's not overbearing, right? I feel like Dawn can be a very overbearing character because she almost always makes it far in people's stories because she's such a unique archetype. But yeah, we're gonna skip these versions of Mike because that's not the real Mike. Joe, oh man. I feel like Joe is really easy to write for. Okay, no. I feel like Joe is really easy to write for because if you think about it, she's a really static character. She's just kind of the same throughout all of her appearances, but she's just fun. She's just so... I don't... Okay. She's kind of like a girl boss character, but she's not really that. And you have little hints here and there. You know, she says that she's never kissed a guy. She said in the episode with where Lindsay gets captured, she talks about, like, you know, makeup and stuff. And there's a lot of things you can do with gender. I know that some of the stuff with Joe and Lightning probably hasn't aged that well. I don't know for sure. I've never really looked that deep into it, but I feel like some of that stuff would not fly nowadays. But for the most part, that is an interesting character to analyze, even though in the canon show, there's not a lot of it. There's enough foundation that you can work off of that. And, you know, she's kind of like mean-spirited, but also not really an antagonist, and there is stuff you can do with that. You can give her maybe a slight redemption arc. I'm not saying you should make her like super nice and cheery, but these are the characters that I feel like have the most wiggle room. You have the antagonistic characters, you can turn them nice, of course, but you have the characters that are kind of in the middle, where obviously she's on the villains team in All-Stars, but I wouldn't call her like an outright villain, even though she's kind of mean at times. And I don't know, I feel like she gets humbled by Cameron, and she's a good sport about it too, so, in Revenge of the Island, so, I don't know. I think the biggest problem for me writing Joe in my story is that sometimes you just really need to come up with clever zingers for her because that's the kind of character she is. And a lot of the times my nicknames, the nicknames I give to Joe to give to the other characters are kind of not funny. And I don't know, it's just really hard to come up with that many nicknames. I don't know how the writers do it. They're really creative, I guess. So solely for the nicknames, I'm gonna have to put her in A and not the highest tier, not S tier. But yeah, I think Joe is like pretty easy to write for. I feel like it's hard to mess up Joe, right? You have to go out of your way to actively mess up Joe. Okay. Lightning's another character where okay, I hate that I have to kind of repeat this again, but I feel like there's a bit of sensitivity with writing Lightning because, you know, he talks in third person. Some of his slang is a little stereotypical, I would say. I feel like nowadays there'd be a lot more sensitivity around that stuff. It's like, you know, don't get me wrong, he's still like a funny character. I feel like for most people who only are only fans of the first 3 seasons, Lightning is probably like the standout like of the later seasons for any of the OG fans, right? Because, you know, he's so funny with his shabam stuff like that, and you know, he's kind of dumb, but he's also like just got that competitive spirit that's really endearing. But again, I think there's some sensitivity you need to write around him. I don't know. I don't want to be the friend that's overly, you know, like PC or anything like that, but, you know. That being said, there's that storyline with his dad where, you know, he wants to, you know, he's like, Lightning, you have to win this, and then obviously in the alternate ending, or I guess the canon ending, he loses to Cameron, so there are avenues you can go with that. He's kind of like Joe, like, he's put on the villains team, but I really, like, yeah, he's mean to Cameron, but, like, I wouldn't say he's, like, an antagonist at all. There's a lot of routes you can go with him, and obviously him being an early boot in All-Stars, that's like, you know, second place and then early boot in All-Stars, man, he's very ripe for being a winner character. You know, you could have him make the end game in a future season, right? I don't know. I feel like Lightning is very fun. I think the problem with Noah and Lindsay and kind of Owen is that, like, okay, maybe not Owen, but like you have to be more structurally funny. Like you have to have like jokes with setups and stuff like that. I feel like with Lightning, you just make Lightning do dumb stuff and it's funny and endearing and it's in character. So I'm gonna put Lightning in A tier. Yeah, I'll put Lightning in A tier. Bit of sensitivity, but yeah, Lightning in A tier. Next we have Mike, and Mike is another character who I think you would have to be very sensitive about because the way they portrayed his disorder, his mental health thing. I'm not an expert, so I'm not gonna like pretend that I'm an expert at all. His multiple personality disorder is what they called it, but it's actually dissociative identity disorder. And I understand why, because it's a cartoon, and saying MPD is an easier way to portray Mike to the younger members of the audience, right? It's a more like definitive label, I guess. I feel like that is such an early 2010s trope, or late 2000s, early 2010s trope that has not particularly aged well, especially because Mal, of course, is the the villain, the evil, sociopathic, sinister villain. It's like it's so stereotypical, and it's just I don't know. I feel like Mike, you have to be very careful. It's another case of like, you know, him or Zoe are the winner characters of All Stars. It's like, are you really gonna make another story where he wins? I don't know. Maybe you want to do a rewrite of All Stars where it's like he's still the winner or finalist character, but it's not nearly as you know, controversial or cartoony. And I get it, it's a cartoon, but like this really was like the most cartoonish thing ever that just took away from a lot of All Stars, in my opinion. But I don't know. I feel like, where did I put Mike? The thing with Mike is that he himself is kind of boring. His alters, his personalities are the more fun aspects of it, but again, you have to be kind of careful. And also, it's like public knowledge now, right? It's like all the if you're doing this, if you're doing a post-canon story, all the people know about his different personalities, and also they're gone, actually, yeah, because of the reset button. That's right. Oh boy, the reset button. Man, I love the Gen 2 cast, but man, there's a lot of controversy. Is Mike D tier? Not D tier as in like he's a bad character. Well, I mean, but that's not the tier list we're doing. We're doing in terms of how hard they're to write. I feel like Mike is pretty hard to write, especially like, you know, because he would just be kind of boring. I feel like more often than not in post-canon stories, Mike would probably be like a very early elimination. And yeah, let's put him in D. Actually, no, let's put him in. We're actually putting him here. I'll put him above B just because like Mike can talk. You know, I don't know. There's stuff with his relationship with Zoe that you can maybe work on, but okay, you know what? Yeah, because he does have avenues where it's like you could focus on what Mike is without his personalities. You could focus on his relationship with Zoe, his friendship with Cameron. There is stuff you can do. It's just, it's hard. It's hard. Sam is interesting because he's a nerd character. Nerd characters are inherently easy to write. I don't think he's a nerd character that's a direct reference to anything other than Seth Rogen, but like even then, it's more subtle. Not subtle, but like it's more in the background, I would say. I think Sam's fun because he's been booted early twice. You could maybe have an arc where he learns to be stronger, learns to make it farther, play the game, beyond the video game stuff. I don't know. Sam is really, he's such an out there character. Why was he an All-Star? It makes sense why. Okay, it makes sense why, because they needed 7 characters and only 6 characters made the merge. But it's like, why Sam? I don't know. Oof. Where do we go from here? I feel like Sam is kind of like C tier. He's just like kind of your nerd character. You would have to probably create your own plotline that diverges from canon, but I feel like it's not super out of the realm of possibility. It's like the middling character problem that I talked about in the previous episode, where you have your Duncans, Courtneys, Gwens, you know, Heathers, the characters with a lot of screen time. Then you have the characters with, like, you know, very low amount of screen time, like Ezekiel, Tyler, Noah, etc., etc. And the problem with some of the characters that have kind of like middle of the road screen time is that you have a good amount of their personality, but not a lot of direction on where to go, if that makes sense. It's sort of like how a character like Ezekiel has a lot of potential, whereas a character like, let's say, Bridget, has shown her potential, and it's not a whole lot, but it's also not a whole lot of screen time. Does any of that make sense? Please let me know if that makes sense. And I feel like Sam kind of has that problem as well. But I'll put him in C tier because I think C is like the baseline tier where it's like, yeah, he's probably fine. So yeah, let's go with that. Next we have Scott, and I feel like Scott is another character where you have 2 different versions of him that are fun to use. You have the Revenge of the Island guy, where he's kind of an evil, throwing person who throws the challenges, I guess. But you also have the All Stars, where he's a lot gentler, he's a lot nicer, he's a lot more of a himbo, I guess. And it's fun to play around with. Obviously, he hurt a lot of characters in Revenge of the Island, and All Stars doesn't really do, a good job of that, because he really only ever interacts with Courtney in that season. But yeah, I feel like Scott interacts with a lot of characters, and you could have him bounce off of them. He's another character who, while being a pain magnet is the gag, it's less of a visual gag than someone like Tyler, I would say, because his stuff is getting hurt by the animals. So that's more inherently funny than Tyler just flopping all the time. So you can make that funny. He is also kind of a schemy character, but his schemes sometimes fail, and that's fun. It's fun to write for that. Maybe you could have a story where he wants to prove himself that he's no, I'm not a bad person. I don't know, because he's obviously the villain in season 4, but season 5, he's not really the villain anymore. He's not even trying to be superly villainous beyond the first few episodes. Once he meets Courtney, he gets really I'm not gonna say soft, but I don't know, he becomes more likable. And I feel Scott there's a lot of things you can do with Scott that I feel because there's all these dimensions, you can write him in several different ways, and it would still make sense. You could maybe make him oh, hey, I want to be a bad guy again, or hey, no, I'm still gonna be the soft-spoken guy. Not soft-spoken, but the softer, gentler version of myself, and it would still make sense. It wouldn't feel flanderization or derailment, right? So I hate that term, derailment. Oh gosh. Next we have Staci, and Staci, obviously, if you're gonna make Staci your winner character, that's already here. How are you gonna do that? Staci is a 1-episode gag character, and I feel the difference between the first generation is that even if the characters were stereotypes of teenagers, at least they gave some of them the benefit of the doubt that these could probably be real people you meet. I feel after Gen 1, all the early boot characters, or most of the early boot characters, were always characterized as caricatures. Staci is the most obvious, where it's she's kind of a liar. And yeah, you could do a storyline where it's Staci, why do you lie so much? Why are there hidden insecurities there? Okay, because of that, I talked myself out of it. She's not in the lowest tier. She's in D tier because yeah, it's just hard to write for a character like that. Yeah, she talks about her oh my god, my great grandfather. I don't know. Yeah, let's put her in D tier. Good luck making her your final. I want to read a story where she makes it far. I'm really curious to see how someone would pull that off without it being annoying. I don't think it's impossible, but because she was designed to be a gag character, it's kind of there. Lastly, we have Zoe. Zoe's interesting because she has a lot of screen time. She's in every episode of the first of her 2 seasons. The problem is that, could you tell me a few of Zoe's character traits despite her massive amount of screen time? Probably not. She's nice. She likes Mike. She has that commando phase, which is pretty cool. You could work on that. Maybe you could have a story where she's reacting to the backlash of her win in All Stars. That'd be fun. Or it's oh, everyone online said I was so dumb. I feel that's not really a total drama thing though, but that's more of an adventure camp thing where the characters are aware of their reputations online. But I don't know. I'm gonna put Zoe kind of in C tier. I don't think she's particularly hard to write, but it's how are you gonna justify her making it far again? What can you do there? There is stuff you can do with Zoe. It's just, I think she's more of a baseline character, just like Sam, where it's up to the writer to give her more layers beyond what she got. And that's weird to say for a character who is in so many episodes, right? For a character who does make it far twice. But I feel in the canon show, she's just kind of nice girl, protagonist. There are little insecurities here and there, but I feel the show doesn't do an amazing job at pushing it. I know there are a few episodes where, no, it was literally just one episode where she talks to Dawn, and Dawn makes her feel better about Mike. I think that there are some moments where she's, Dakota and her have an interesting dynamic. I think there's some times where Scott manipulates her, and it's that shows Zoe's naivete. The entire All Stars just shows Zoe's naivete. I don't know. Yeah, I think C tier is fair. Because, yeah, there's stuff you can do with Zoe, but, I mean, it's up to the reader. It's up to the writer to really enhance what we were given. So yeah, here is the tier list of the Revenge of the Island characters, in my personal opinion, very subjective opinion, but it's my opinion nonetheless. Let me know if you guys agree or disagree. Let me know if you guys enjoy these tier lists. I really love the Gen 2 cast. I've read a good amount of fanfics. I have my own fanfic in the description if you want to read that. Let me know any good stories with the Gen 2 characters that I should check up on. If you have any stories that have Dawn or Mike or Staci or Bea go far and you want me to check out, let me know. I love the shuffled verse, the total drama, the total shuffled island story. So if there's anything that's written kind of like that, then let me know. But yeah, thank you all for watching. We'll see you guys next time. Support me on Patreon if you have the money to do so. And I guess we'll see you for Gen 3. Bye-bye.